Kale Thorn crouched low on the jagged rocks of the Skyforge Mountains. The wind cut across the cliffs, sharp and cold, carrying with it the faint tang of strange minerals and the distant roar of creatures he had yet to see. Valira 9 was not kind to humans. Its gravity pulsed unpredictably, sometimes light and springy, sometimes heavy and crushing. Acid rain could fall without warning, eating through clothing and skin alike. Most people avoided these mountains. Kale did not. He had come seeking something that few had ever seen and even fewer had survived to tell about. He adjusted the straps of his pack, checking the scanners he had laid across a narrow ledge. The devices hummed softly, picking up heat signatures, movement and subtle vibrations in the rock. Kale was looking for dragons, but not the legends told in old stories. These were Valiran dragons, small by comparison to the ancient beasts of myth, but clever beyond imagination. They were hunters, thinkers, and, according to some reports, capable of basic communication. Most humans thought them dangerous and unpredictable. Kale thought they were fascinating, and worth the risk. Night fell quickly in the mountains and shadows stretched like living fingers across the cliffs. Kale's boots crunched against loose gravel as he moved to a vantage point overlooking a deep ravine. There, the wind seemed to swirl differently, carrying the scent of minerals and life. His scanner beeped softly, something small was moving below. Then he heard it. A faint, high-pitched murmur. At first he thought it was the wind playing tricks. But it had rhythm almost like words. Kale froze. He strained to listen. "We can eat your leftovers." He blinked. The words repeated, tiny and nervous. His heart raced. The scanners confirmed it. A group of small creatures no bigger than a human child were huddled in the rocks. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Baby dragons. Kale's pulse quickened. He had not expected to find them so soon, nor to hear them speak. He crouched lower, making himself as small as possible, careful not to alert them. The dragon's body shimmered slightly in the moonlight, scales iridescent but fragile-looking. The whispers came again, cautious, almost playful. "We can eat your leftovers." Kale's mind raced. He had faced dangerous wildlife before, but this was different. These were intelligent creatures. They were weighing him, assessing whether he was a threat. One wrong move, one sudden sound, and he could be torn apart in an instant. Yet curiosity gnawed at him. He had trained for this. He could survive. He would survive. He reached slowly into his pack and retrieved a small piece of ration, extending it in an open hand. The baby dragons froze, their tiny heads tilting, bright eyes fixed on the offering. One chirped nervously, stepping closer, sniffing. Another remained behind, hesitant. Kale held his breath, sweat running down his temples despite the cold. He forced himself to move slowly, careful not to startle them. Then a shadow passed overhead, massive and dark. Kale's stomach dropped. The mother dragon had arrived. He barely had time to register the full wingspan, the glint of scales catching the faint moonlight. She landed with barely a sound, muscles tensing, eyes fixed on him. Every instinct screamed at Kale to run. Every sense told him that one wrong step could end everything. But Kale did not move. He had prepared for this moment. The scanner in his pack hummed faintly, analyzing heat signatures, movement patterns and the subtle vibrations of the mother's wings. He studied her, noting the tension in her muscles, the tilt of her head, the flick of her tail. She wasn't attacking yet. She was watching, deciding whether he was dangerous. Kale's mind raced. He could not fight her. He could not outrun her, at least not across this cliff. His only chance was to show intelligence, to communicate in the only way he knew how. He picked up a few loose rocks and dropped them carefully near the mineral deposits at the cliff's edge. The crystals embedded in the rocks caught the moonlight, creating faint glows. The baby dragons chirped, curious, stepping toward the light. The mother shifted slightly, observing. Kale's hands shook, not from fear but from adrenaline. Every sense was heightened. He could feel the wind whipping against his skin, smell the sharp tang of mineral and sweat, hear the quiet hiss of the mother as she tested the air. He knew that if he miscalculated even slightly, this encounter could end badly, not just for him but for the baby dragons as well. Minutes stretched like hours. Kale's heart pounded so loudly he thought it would betray him. The mother dragon's eyes never left him, yet she did not strike. The babies circled him, whispering their strange words again. Kale realized something profound. He was no longer just a human in a dangerous world. He was part of a delicate balance, a moment that could tip into life or death with the slightest action. A low rumble sounded from deeper in the ravine, far enough that it didn't immediately threaten them, but close enough to warn Kale that danger was approaching. Something else was moving in the darkness, something larger than the baby dragons, something that might not hesitate to attack. Kale's stomach tightened. He understood instantly, this was not just a meeting of curiosity and caution. Survival was on the line. He swallowed hard, keeping his eyes locked on the mother dragon, silently signaling with his posture that he meant no harm. Every movement mattered. Every decision was crucial. The wind howled around him as he crouched, the crystals flickering faintly, the baby dragons chirping nervously, the shadow of the mother's wings casting him in half-light. Kale's breath hitched as a ripple of movement caught his eye further down the cliff. Something was approaching, something that could destroy them all. He had no time to plan. Only instinct, courage, and quick thinking would carry him through the next moments. And then he heard it, a low, menacing growl unlike anything he had heard before. The mother stiffened. The babies froze. Kale's mind raced. He had survived impossible odds before, but nothing like this. This was bigger, smarter, faster, deadlier. And yet, Kale knew he could face it. He had to. Kale's heart hammered in his chest as the low growl reverberated through the rocks. The wind whipped his hair into his face, and the moonlight glinted off the mother dragon's scales like molten metal. He had seen predators before, razor-toothed beasts on hostile worlds, but this was something different. This was intelligence wrapped in danger, a force that could think faster than he could move. And yet, Kale had no intention of running. Not now. Not ever. The baby dragons chirped nervously, pressing closer to him, their tiny bodies trembling. Kale's hands shook, but not from fear. This was adrenaline sharpened into clarity. He crouched lower, moving slowly, careful not to spook the mother. She shifted, wings partially unfurling, muscles taut like coiled steel. Kale studied her, memorizing every detail. The curve of her talons, the tilt of her head, the way her eyes followed his every movement. His mind raced. Running would be suicide. Fighting was impossible. But he had something they didn't: understanding. He knew enough about alien behavior to realize that creatures like these evaluated threats by intelligence, not just strength. If he could prove himself clever rather than weak, maybe, just maybe, he could survive. Kale scanned the cliffside with his portable scanner, noting the patterns of the rocks and the mineral deposits. The baby dragons had been whispering something again, their tiny voices repeating the same strange line. "We can eat your leftovers." It was almost playful, but the edge of nervousness was clear. They were testing him, seeing if he could be trusted. He tore a piece of his rations and placed it carefully on a flat stone, stepping back slowly. One of the babies scuttled forward, sniffed the food, and then chirped softly. The mother tilted her head, wings tightening. Kale froze, holding his breath. Every second stretched like an hour. Then the growl returned, louder this time, closer. His scanner picked up heat signatures moving down the ravine. Something massive, much larger than the mother or the babies. A predator, a razor-claw Valyran, a hunter that could crush a human in a single swipe. It was approaching fast, likely tracking the scent of the young dragons. Kale's stomach knotted. One misstep and everything could be over in seconds. He clenched his fists and thought fast. He had no weapons capable of killing this creature, but he did have his mind, and sometimes that was enough. He tore the remaining rations into small chunks, dipping some in mineral dust from the cliffside crystals. Then he tossed them carefully toward a narrow chasm a few meters below. The crystals in the rocks caught the moonlight, creating faint flickering glows. The baby dragon's eyes lit up. They were curious, distracted. Kale pulled a compact sonic emitter from his pack, a device he had tested for deterring predators. He adjusted it quickly, mimicking the distress call of baby dragons. The sound echoed softly through the rocks. The razor claw hesitated, confused by the conflicting signals. Kale's pulse pounded, but he forced himself to breathe slowly, thinking ahead. The mother dragon let out a low, rolling hiss. Kale froze, unsure if it was anger or warning. Then, surprisingly, she nudged one of the babies toward the glowing crystals as if guiding them. Kale realized what was happening. She was allowing him to intervene. She was testing him, testing whether he could protect her young. He acted quickly, motioning the babies behind a rocky overhang while keeping his body low. The razor claw roared, frustrated, and lunged toward the glowing chasm. Kale's improvised distraction worked. The predator was drawn away from the young dragons, temporarily blinded by the crystals and sonic mimicry. He exhaled slowly, trying not to let relief make him sloppy. But the danger was far from over. The razor claw's growls were getting closer, and the creature was smart. It would not be fooled for long. Kale realized he had seconds, maybe less, before it figured out the trick. He scanned the cliff for anything he could use: Loose rocks, jagged minerals, narrow ledges. Then he saw it, a thin layer of volatile mineral embedded along the cliff's edge. If disturbed, it would explode in a controlled way, enough to startle the predator without harming the dragons or himself. He gathered a few rocks and lined them carefully along the mineral deposits. His hands shook, but his mind was sharp. The razor claw was within 30 meters now, eyes fixed on the babies. Kale's pulse roared in his ears. He had to act. He threw a single rock onto the crystals. Sparks flew, small shards of glowing dust erupting into the air. The razor claw yelped, momentarily blinded, retreating slightly. The mother swept her massive wings wide, shielding the babies and signaling them to move. Kale guided the last baby under her protective wings. He could feel the heat of her scales through the brush of her wing, a reminder of how fragile and small he really was. Yet he did not flinch. Every instinct, every ounce of training, every beat of courage brought him through. He had survived not by brute force, but by understanding, quick thinking and bravery in the face of a nearly impossible threat. The razor claw growled one last time before retreating down the ravine, unwilling to risk further engagement. The mother dragon lowered her wings, glancing at Kale with something almost like acknowledgement, or perhaps respect. The babies chirped softly, circling him as if thanking him in their own way. Kale's chest heaved. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the cold mist of the mountains. He looked over the edge of the cliff into the dark ravine below, realizing the razor claw might not be gone forever. More predators could be nearby, drawn by the noise, the movement, the scent of dragons. But for now he had survived. He had protected the babies. He had earned a fragile trust from one of the universe's deadliest creatures. And yet, as he tightened his grip on his pack and scanned the horizon, Kale sensed it. Something else was coming, something bigger, faster, and even more dangerous. The night was far from over, and the mountains still had secrets to reveal. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the challenge ahead. He knew survival here would demand more than courage, it would demand ingenuity, speed, and heart. And he was ready. Kale pressed himself against the jagged rock, his breathing shallow. The razor claw had retreated for now, but he knew it, or another predator, would return. In the dim moonlight, the cliffside shimmered with mineral deposits, tiny glints that could be both ally and danger. Every movement mattered. One false step and he could slide into the ravine or worse, provoke a predator that could crush him in seconds. The baby dragons chirped softly, huddling closer. Kale's hands hovered over his pack, ready for anything. He knew instinct alone would not keep him alive. He needed strategy, observation, calculation. This was no longer a simple encounter. It was a test of human ingenuity against a predator species that lived and died by instinct and intelligence. He scanned the cliff, noting every loose rock, every overhang, every shadowed crevice. The mother dragon had settled nearby, wings half unfurled, eyes tracking his movements. Kale realized the mother was not just guarding her young. She was evaluating him, measuring how much she could trust him. It was a silent negotiation, one that could end in life or death. The growl returned, this time sharper, closer. Kale's scanner picked up heat signatures moving through the ravine below. The razor claw was approaching again, following the scent of the babies. He had no weapons capable of killing it. Firearms or explosives were useless here. The predator was too fast, too smart, and the terrain too unstable. Kale's only advantage was his mind, his ability to think faster than the razor claw could react. He tore apart a portion of his rations, mixing them with mineral dust from the cliffside crystals. He tossed the mixture toward a narrow chasm, creating a faint glittering distraction. The baby dragons chirped, eyes fixed on the glowing fragments. Kale adjusted the sonic emitter, setting it to mimic the distress calls of the young dragons. The sounds echoed through the rocks, confusing the razor claw. It hesitated, unsure which target to pursue. Kale exhaled slowly, forcing his heart to steady. He had created an opening, but it was temporary. The razor claw would soon adapt. He needed a more permanent solution. He crouched low, scanning for anything that could change the balance. That's when he noticed the jagged mineral deposits above a narrow ledge. They were unstable, reactive. With a small impact, they could explode in sparks and shards, enough to startle or block a predator, but not harm the dragons or him if carefully handled. He gathered a few loose rocks and positioned them along the edge of the minerals. Every movement had to be precise. One miscalculation could collapse the ledge and crush him. His fingers were numb from cold, his heart racing, but Kale forced himself to stay calm. His eyes flicked to the mother dragon. She shifted slightly, a low hiss vibrating through the rock. a signal perhaps that she understood what he was doing. Kale's plan was simple but dangerous. He would trigger the mineral deposits at the exact moment the razor claw lunged, using the explosion as both a distraction and a barrier. Timing was everything. He took a deep breath, forcing his mind to focus on nothing but the predator, the cliff, and the dragons. The razor claw appeared at the edge of his vision, massive and black, muscles rippling beneath its scaled hide. It crouched low, preparing to leap. Kale's pulse surged. He grabbed a rock, calculated the angle, and tossed it with precision onto the minerals. Sparks flew. A cascade of glowing shards erupted into the night, and the razor claw yelped in confusion, retreating slightly. The mother dragon seized the moment. She swept her wings wide, creating a protective barrier over the babies. Kale guided the last of the young dragons under her shadow, feeling the heat of her scales brush against his arm. Every nerve in his body screamed tension, but he did not flinch. He had calculated the risk, anticipated the predator's reaction, and acted with precision. Courage alone would not have saved him. Only intellect combined with fearlessness had allowed this moment to succeed. The razor claw circled, frustrated, growling low. It tested the barrier of rock and fire for weaknesses but found none. Kale realized he had more time than he thought, though not much. The creature's intelligence meant it would adapt quickly. He needed to prepare for the next move and fast. Sweat ran down his face, stinging his eyes, but he ignored it. He focused instead on the baby dragons who now chirped softly, following his gaze. They were learning, mimicking his gestures, their tiny bodies moving cautiously but with growing confidence. Even the mother seemed to acknowledge his skill. She wasn't just protecting them anymore, she was allowing him to guide the encounter. Kale's mind raced through possibilities. Could he lead the razor claw into a trap? Could he use the terrain, the minerals, and the dragon's instincts together? Every scenario had risk, but he had no other choice. Humans had survived countless impossible worlds, and this was another test. Another chance to prove ingenuity, courage, and heart in the face of overwhelming odds. As he prepared for the next step, a shadow moved above the cliff. Something massive, larger than the razor claw, moving silently and deliberately. Kale's stomach tightened. He had thought he had handled the immediate danger, but the mountains held more secrets than he realized. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a predator. It was a challenge the likes of which he had never faced. Kale's pulse quickened, but determination burned brighter. He had come this far, faced creatures that could crush him in a heartbeat, and survived. He would not falter now. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same combination of courage and cleverness that had brought him this far. The baby dragons chirped, the mother shifted, and the unknown shadow lingered above. Kale's mind raced, calculating, preparing. The night was far from over. The battle for survival had only just begun. Kale's eyes narrowed as the shadow above the cliff moved with a purpose that made his stomach tighten. This wasn't the razor claw. This was something larger, stronger, and far more deliberate. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of hot scales and raw power. He had survived countless alien worlds, faced predators that could tear a man apart in seconds, but this felt like staring at the edge of death itself. He scanned the cliffside, noting every detail. Loose rocks, mineral deposits, narrow ledges, all potential weapons or traps. His mind raced. He had seconds to act. The baby dragons chirped nervously, pressed against the mother. The mother shifted, wings half open, eyes locked on the approaching shadow. She had already risked herself for him once. Now it was his turn to act. The creature appeared fully. Its massive form blotted out the moonlight, scales glinting faintly, claws sharp enough to crush rock. Its eyes were bright, intelligent, and hungry. Kale's breath caught, but he didn't flinch. He had no weapons that could kill it, no escape route guaranteed safe. The only option was strategy, speed, and courage. He ripped a piece of his remaining rations, coated it with mineral dust, and threw it down the narrow ravine to the side. The glint of crystals caught the massive predator's attention. It snarled, head turning toward the distraction. Kale used the pause to his advantage. He grabbed a small flare from his pack, ignited it, and swung it toward the cliff edge. The flare sparked against mineral deposits, sending a cascade of glowing shards into the air. The predator yelped, blinded and startled. The mother dragon immediately flapped her wings, creating a protective barrier over her young. Kale lunged forward, guiding the last baby dragon under her wings. Heat and motion pressed against him as he moved. Every muscle screamed with tension, but he kept steady, letting instinct and training guide him. The creature recovered quickly. It lunged, massive claws aimed where Kale had been moments before. Kale rolled to the side, feeling the force of wind and debris brush his shoulder. He hit the cliff wall, heart pounding, and immediately sprang to his feet. The razor claw, he realized it wasn't alone. Smaller predators were following, drawn to the commotion. The situation was rapidly escalating. Kale knew he had to create a decisive advantage. He scanned the terrain again, his eyes locking on a narrow ledge above the ravine. It was risky, but if he could trigger the mineral deposits above while the predators were below, he could funnel them into a controlled trap. There was no room for error. One misstep and the baby dragons or the mother could be crushed. He climbed quickly, carefully, every movement precise. The baby dragons chirped anxiously, following under the mother's watchful wings. The predators snarled below, sensing the humans and dragons moving. Kale positioned himself above the minerals, picking up loose rocks and aligning them just right. His hands were slick with sweat, his heart racing, but he focused, blocking out fear. Then came the moment. The largest predator leapt toward the cliff edge, claws outstretched. Kale hurled the first rock. Sparks flew, the mineral deposits ignited, cascading down in a dazzling, controlled explosion. Rocks, shards, and sparks erupted, striking the predators and forcing them backward. The razor claw yelped, its smaller companions scrambling to avoid the falling debris. Kale's plan worked, but only partially. The predators were momentarily disoriented, but not gone. He had to finish this. He grabbed the flare, swinging it in a wide arc, forcing the remaining predators toward the edge of the cliff. The mother dragon roared, a deep, vibrating sound that shook the rocks. Her wings beat furiously, kicking up wind and smoke, shielding her young and Kale alike. Kale lunged forward, guiding the baby dragons along a narrow, safe path through the chaos. His mind calculated every step, every chance for error, every possible reaction from the predators. Adrenaline sharpened his focus. Fear was present, but it was a tool, not a weakness. Courage alone would not have saved him. Only careful planning combined with split-second action. The largest predator, recovering from the flare and sparks, lunged one last time. Kale planted his feet, grabbed a heavy rock, and sent it spinning toward the cliffside crystals. The resulting explosion sent shards and light into the predator's eyes, momentarily blinding it. The mother dragon took advantage, flaring her wings and knocking the predator off balance. It scrambled back, retreating down the ravine with its companions. Kale dropped to his knees, gasping, sweat and soot streaking his face. The mother dragon lowered her wings, eyes meeting his briefly. It was not gratitude in human terms but something like respect. The baby dragons chirped softly, circling him, tentative but alive. He had saved them. He had survived. He had faced overwhelming odds and won not by brute force, but by courage, intelligence and quick thinking. For a long moment, Kale just breathed, listening to the wind, the dragons, the distant echoes of retreating predators. The mountains were quiet again, but the danger had left its mark. He felt a deep connection, not just to the dragons but to the universe itself. Life here was fragile but also powerful. And humans, he realized, could shine even in the darkest, most dangerous corners of alien worlds. Yet Kale knew the night was far from over. The mountains still held secrets, still held dangers he could not yet see. The razor claws might return or something even worse. But for now he had turned the impossible into survival. The mother dragon and her young were safe. And in that brief moment, Kale Thorne understood something vital. Courage, intelligence and heart were weapons no predator could match. He rose to his feet, brushing ash from his clothes. The mother dragon nudged the babies toward a safer ledge, glancing back once more at Kale. A silent message passed between them. You have proven yourself worthy. Kale allowed himself a small, grim smile. The night was not over, but he had survived the impossible. And as he looked toward the dark horizon, he sensed it. The mountain still had one more secret waiting for him. A challenge that would push every ounce of courage, every shred of intelligence and every heartbeat to the limit. The first light of Valyrix's pale sun crept over the jagged peaks of the Skyforge Mountains. Kale Thorne crouched on the ledge, chest heaving, muscles aching from the night's battle. The razor claws had retreated, leaving only the mother dragon and her babies. For the first time the world seemed still. But Kale knew this calm was fragile. Predators could return, storms could strike, and the mountains had more secrets than even he could anticipate. He glanced at the baby dragons. They chirped softly, blinking their iridescent eyes at him. Kale smiled faintly. Despite their tiny size, they had survived, guided by his instincts and courage. But survival alone was not enough. He needed to ensure that the creatures had a chance at life beyond mere refuge on this cliffside. He had seen firsthand how fragile life was in these mountains, and humans had a responsibility to protect it whenever they could. Kale moved carefully along the rocky ledge, scanning the ravine for a safe path. The mother dragon followed him, wings partially extended as if to shield him as much as her young. He realized something profound: she trusted him. Not blindly but with measured caution. That trust was fragile, earned through action and risk, and he intended to honor it. His plan was simple yet dangerous. He would lead the dragons to a hidden valley farther down the cliffs, a place he had scouted weeks earlier. The valley was rich with crystal pools and edible flora, isolated enough to keep predators at bay, yet accessible enough for the mother to hunt and teach her young. If he succeeded, the dragons would have a sanctuary, and his mission would not have been in vain. Every step down the cliff was a calculation. Loose rocks could slide underfoot, sudden gusts of wind could throw him off balance. He moved slowly, keeping his weight low and steady. The baby dragons followed, their small claws clicking against stone, guided by the mother and by Kale's careful hand gestures. He murmured softly, encouraging them, each step a reassurance. Courage was not just in facing the razor claw, it was in guiding the fragile lives of these creatures through a treacherous landscape. A shadow flickered above, the sun catching the ridge of another cliff. Kale froze, heart hammering. He thought it might be another predator, but it was smaller, curious, and cautious. Perhaps a young razor claw observing from a distance. Kale's mind raced. He couldn't afford confrontation, but he also couldn't hesitate. He signaled the dragons, gesturing to keep low. Timing was everything. The mother nudged the babies down a narrow crevice and Kale followed, leading them toward the hidden valley. The crevice narrowed, forcing him to move sideways, scraping against stone and dust. Every sense was alive: the sound of shifting rock, the scent of minerals, the distant call of unknown creatures. But Kale's focus never wavered. He was not just surviving, he was guiding life itself through danger. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the mountains. Rocks loosened from the cliffs above, sliding toward them. Kale reacted instinctively, pushing the last baby dragon into the mother's protective wings and throwing himself over them to shield them from falling debris. Sharp stones grazed his shoulder and back, but he held firm. He could feel the heat of the mother's scales against him, her body taut and protective. Together, they navigated the falling rocks, and Kale's quick thinking prevented disaster. When the rumble subsided, the dragons and Kale were still alive. The hidden valley lay ahead, bathed in soft sunlight and sparkling crystal pools. Kale allowed himself a small moment of triumph, but he knew the work wasn't done. The dragons needed safety, stability, and space to thrive. He gestured to the mother, showing the shallow pools and edible plants. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then nudged the babies toward the resources. Kale's heart lifted. They understood. He settled on a high ridge overlooking the valley, watching as the mother taught her young to hunt, to chirp, and to explore. The babies' eyes glowed with curiosity, their small bodies stretching and leaping with growing confidence. Kale felt an overwhelming sense of pride. He had faced the razor claw, survived impossible odds, and used intelligence, courage, and heart to protect these creatures. Humanity, in that moment, had proven itself capable of more than survival. It could inspire trust and respect from the most formidable beings in the universe. Kale knew he could not stay. The mountains demanded vigilance and humans were outsiders here. But he had left a mark. He had ensured that life could continue, that the dragons could grow strong, and that the delicate balance of the valley would be preserved. He glanced at the mother one last time. Her eyes met his. Not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. Respect. Recognition that he had been more than a human. He had been a guardian. As Kale began the climb back toward the main ridge, he reflected on the night. He had faced creatures stronger, faster, and smarter than him. He had acted not with brute force, but with intelligence, quick thinking, and unwavering courage. Every step, every decision, every heartbeat had mattered. Humanity had not just survived, it had shined. From his vantage point, Kale looked back at the hidden valley. The sun now fully illuminated the scene. The mother and babies moved with grace and confidence, exploring their new home. Kale felt a deep satisfaction, a rare emotion he carried through countless worlds and dangers. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were also capable of brilliance, compassion, and heroism in moments that demanded it most. He turned, heading back toward the mountains. Danger would return, challenges would arise, but Kale knew he had proven something vital. Humans could face the impossible, stand tall against overwhelming odds, and leave the world better than they found it. The dragon's survival was proof. Courage, intelligence, and determination were weapons no predator could resist, and no world could ignore. As he disappeared into the jagged paths of the Skyforge Mountains, Kale felt the unspoken bond lingering, a connection between human and dragon, trust earned through risk and daring. The mountains whispered around him, full of life, full of danger, and full of opportunity. And Kale Thorne knew that wherever the universe challenged humanity next, humans would meet it head-on. He had survived. He had protected life. And he had shown, in the harshest of worlds, that humanity could shine even in the darkest moments.